Hi there. This short video is on using the SFD Graphic Generator and help with estimating the proportion of the contents of any tank or pit which is fecal sludge. Some users have reported difficulty with knowing when to change these default values, which are given in step 2 of the generator. To help users, we've provided a help button, and secondly, there is a helper tool in the Knowledge tab of the SFD web portal. So in this video, we'll have a look at both of these resources in more detail, and hopefully therefore improve understanding of when to change the defaults and when to leave them as they are. So firstly, we'll come out of PowerPoint and we'll go to the graphic generator, which is in the Susanna SFD web portal. And I'll click Start a New Graphic and scroll down to step 2. And as you can see, I'm now at the same place as the screenshot I showed in the opening PowerPoint. So first, let's have a look at the Help button that was highlighted. Importantly, this states that in the absence of any data, you should use the default 100% value where on-site containers are connected to soak pits, to water bodies or to open ground. The 100% default value is based on two key assumptions. One, that most containers are emptied when they are full, in other words, just before emptying, when they are 100% full of fecal sludge. Of course, the proportion emptied will be context specific and dependent on the emptying services in the city. The second assumption is that the remaining not emptied proportion is made up of fecal sludge which remains in the container because it's gone hard or solid and cannot be emptied, or for some other reason, and supernatant when the container is discharging to water bodies or to open ground, or infiltrate when, for instance, from permeable leach pits or from any soak pit connected to a tank of some kind. So let's have a look at the selection grid and see specifically which systems this note is referring to. Well, it means that when you select one of the tank systems connected to a soak pit, these systems, or a tank connected to a water body or to open ground, these systems, or any tank or pit which has no outlet or overflow, then in the absence of any relevant data you have about your city, it's recommended that you should not change these 100% values for the septic tank, the fully lined tank, the tank with open bottoms or any type of pit. These values are important because they are used in the calculations made by the tool to generate the outcome, which is then displayed in the graphic. Okay, but what about these other systems? So tanks connected to sewers, or tanks connected to open drains. With these types of systems, over time the fecal sludge settles in the container while the supernatant continually discharges and flows out to sewers or the open drain system, which importantly may or may not reach treatment. In the cities where these types of systems exist, it's clearly important to be able to model both the fecal sludge emptying, transport and treatment and the supernatant or liquid effluent transport and treatment, and therefore indicate if the flows are safely managed or not. Ideally, in order to be able to model these systems, we need to know the proportion of the inflow that remains in the container as fecal sludge and the proportion of the inflow that flows out as supernatant to the sewer or open drains. And where data is available on these proportions, users should enter it by changing these default values here. Where it isn't available, where there's no data on this split, which we suspect will be in the majority of cases, what advice can we give, and therefore what's written in this note. So let's take a look at the rest of the note, which says, where on-site containers are connected to a sewer network or to open drains, using a value of 50% means that half the contents are modelled as faecal sludge, and the other half of the content is modelled as supernatant discharging into the sewer network or to open drains. So the 50% value splits the flow in two and enables both the solid and liquid fractions to be modelled. As I've said, this isn't based on data, it's based on minimising the maximum error, and where data is available, users should apply it appropriately. So, what does this look like on our selection grid? So, if you choose any of these septic tanks connected to sewers, or a septic tank connected to open drains, if you don't have any of the data, we suggest you split the flow by choosing 50%, which will enable you to model both the faecal sludge flow and the supernatant flow. And exactly the same if you've got fully lined tanks connected to any of these types of sewers or to this open drain, this value should be changed to 50%. And the same with the tanks with open bottoms, which in the unlikely event they're connected to sewers or to an open drain, this value should be changed to 50%. As I said at the start, we've also made a helper tool to support users further, and you can find this here in the Knowledge tab under How to Make an SFD. I want to put this next to the selection grid so that we can see both at the same time. So I'm just going to open a link in a new window. And have that open at the same time. So the helper tool is in the Tools and Report Templates folder under the subheading SFD Graphic Generator, and I click on this second link and it opens the tool automatically. If we go to the introduction, it just gives a bit of background, specifically that it's to do with the graphic generator in step 2, and that the guidance is aimed at the septic tanks, fully lined tanks, tanks with open bottoms and all types of pit, i.e. these headings we have here. There's a link to the guidance, which is pretty much to the note we've just been looking at, so it gives some more details on that. But the most important part is the interactive tool. If I open the link there, it takes us to this page, and I can use this to find out what proportion to enter in step 2 of the graphic generator for each of the systems. So let's go back to the selection grid. If I want to choose my septic tank with soak pits again, I click on this yellow button here and it takes me directly to the page which explains how the system works and assumptions to apply where there is no data on the proportion of the tank which is faecal sludge. And the advice given, as per the note that we were looking at, is that you should use the value of 100% where septic tanks are connected to soak pits. So we don't need to change this value on the selection grid. In contrast, if I choose my example of septic tanks connected to open drains, and on this tool I select septic tank connected to open drain, again there's an explanation of how the system works and the advice given on the assumption where there is no data. And the advice is that we should change this value to 50% when we select open drains. septic tanks with open drains. And a slightly different example perhaps, if we take the unlined pit with no outlet or overflow, and we use the tool and find the same system on here, which is this one, unlined pit with no outlet or overflow. It explains the assumptions, and where there is no data on which to base the proportion that is fecal sludge, the advice is to use 100%. So in this case, all types of pit is mentioned here, so we can leave this value at 100%. The tool also has guidance, as well as helping with decision making. There is guidance on what value to use where on-site technologies are connected to different locations. So you might have a situation where the majority of people have septic tanks with soak pits, but some have septic tanks connected to open drains. Therefore you'd want to use both the 100% value and the 50% value on the same SFD. There's a suggestion that you can adjust the type of systems you select. So rather than for the smaller proportion, you could choose the fully lined tanks. If you haven't got any systems like that, you can substitute that on your calculations, and it will provide you with the same credible answer for the SFD. Alternatively, you can prorata the values and adjust these percentages appropriately. And there are examples here of how to do that. But hopefully, if you're stuck on step 2, you'll find this tool, perhaps the most helpful part, and you'll be able to follow and use the advice given here, which of course is the same as the advice given in the note, but just presented in a different way. So I hope that helps you understand when and how to change the default values in step 2, and showed you where you can find help and advice, and therefore help you use the graphic generator more confidently. But if you have any comments or questions, please do feel free to get in touch. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and all the best.